My wife told our kids I abandoned them while I was hospitalized. I hadn't even been home a full day when my son wouldn't look me in the eye. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still a bit dizzy from the meds they'd discharged me with, slowly sipping a glass of water. My duffel bag was by the door where I dropped it, and the house felt both familiar and wrong. Familiar in the way the tiles still stuck when you walked barefoot across them, wrong in the way my daughter quietly left the room the moment I entered it. Julie was in the kitchen too, pretending to scroll through her phone. She didn't say much when she picked me up that morning. The drive had been silent except for the sound of her fingernails tapping the steering wheel. I asked, "Is everything okay with the kids?" She shrugged. "They're fine." But they weren't. Eli, our oldest, was 12. He used to talk non-stop about his coding projects and the games he was building with his friends. I used to have to tell him to pause so I could catch up. Now, he barely muttered a word when I walked past his room. Anna, who was 9, usually ran to hug me when I came home from work, always full of little stories from school. But when I saw her that afternoon, she just stood in the hallway, holding the cat like a shield, then walked away. The air in the house was thick with something I couldn't place yet. Not anger. At least not the kind I'd expected, but something colder. I thought maybe they were just scared. I had been gone for nearly 3 weeks. I tried to put myself in their shoes. One day I was here, the next I wasn't. I figured Julie had told them I was in the hospital, that I was sick, that I was getting better. I assumed the truth was the obvious thing to say. Later that evening, I knocked on Eli's door. He didn't answer, but it was open, so I stepped in. He was on his bed, facing the wall. "Hey," I said. He didn't respond. "I know it's been a weird few weeks. I just wanted to check in. See how you're doing." "You left," he said flatly. I blinked. "No, I didn't. You left us," he repeated, still not turning around. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure what he meant. "I didn't leave. I had to go to the hospital," I said. "I was really sick." He rolled over, finally looking at me. His face was blank, but his voice was sharp. "That's not what Mom said." The floor under me seemed to tilt a little. What did she say?" He shrugged, trying to seem casual, but his eyes were wet. "That you just left. That you didn't want to be here anymore." I couldn't think. I just stood there like someone had unplugged me. "No," I said. "That's not true. That's not true at all." He didn't answer. He turned back to the wall. I walked out. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat across from Julie at the kitchen table. "Did you tell them I left?" I asked. She looked at me, slowly, like she'd been waiting for the question. "I told them you weren't coming back," she said, "because I didn't think you were." My heart pounded. "But I didn't leave. I was in the hospital. You knew where I was." She shrugged. "You checked yourself in. You didn't ask. You just disappeared one morning and called me from a psych ward." I stared at her. "That's not what happened. I told you I needed help. I told you I was going in. You were the one who drove me." She looked away. "Not everyone sees it that way." "What way?" She stood up, grabbing her phone and her tea. "I did what I had to do to keep them calm. That's all." She left the room. I sat there until the kitchen got dark. I could hear the kids upstairs, the faint creak of someone walking to the bathroom, the sound of a door closing. I wasn't even angry yet. I was still trying to understand what she'd said, what she'd done, and why she told them I walked out. The next morning, I woke up early, out of habit more than anything. My internal clock hadn't caught up with the quiet of recovery. The house was still. I went downstairs, made coffee, and stood at the back window, looking out at the small patch of frost-covered grass. Everything looked the same out there. I could almost pretend nothing had changed if I didn't turn around. Julie came down an hour later. She didn't acknowledge me at first, just walked straight to the sink and rinsed out a glass. I watched her. It was like watching someone I used to know, someone who wore my wife's face and moved with her gestures but didn't have the same rhythm anymore. I said, "I need to talk to them." She didn't look at me. "About what?" "You know what." She finally turned around. "They don't need to be in the middle of this." "There is no this, Julie. I was in the hospital. I didn't abandon them." She dried the glass with a towel too slowly. "You scared them." "I told you I needed help. You agreed. You helped me pack. What was I supposed to do? Stay and fall apart in front of them?" Her voice was low, but clipped. "You didn't say how bad it was. You didn't say you weren't coming home for 3 weeks. They kept asking where you were. I didn't know what to tell them. That wouldn't make it worse." "So you told them I left?" I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. "I told them I didn't know if you were coming back," she said. "Because I didn't." I didn't say anything after that. I went upstairs and knocked on Anna's door. She didn't answer either, but I pushed it open gently. She was sitting on her rug, coloring. She didn't look up. "Hey, Bug," I said softly. "Can I come in?" She shrugged without looking at me, so I stepped inside and sat on the edge of her bed. "I know it's been weird since I got back," I said, "but I wanted to tell you something important. I didn't leave you. I didn't leave this house." She kept coloring, not fast or angry, just steady. "I was sick," I went on. "Not like a cold or the flu. My brain wasn't working the way it should, and I needed help. So I went to a hospital where they help people like me. I didn't leave you. Anna glanced up for a second, then back at her page. Mom said you weren't coming back. I know she did, I said. But that wasn't true. I never said I wasn't coming back. I missed you every day. Did you talk to us? She asked, still not looking up. No, I said. I wanted to, but I wasn't allowed to at first. The doctor said I needed to focus on getting better. I asked about calling after a week, but... She interrupted. You didn't send a card. I know, I swallowed. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to scare you. She was quiet for a long time, and then she stood up and left the room. I just sat there, staring at the empty spot where she'd been, sitting. The thing was, she was right. I hadn't sent a card. I hadn't written, or called, or tried hard enough to get in touch. Maybe I told myself it was part of the process. Maybe I leaned too hard on what the staff said about boundaries and stability. But the truth was, it was easier not to confront it. Easier not to hear how confused or hurt they might be. Still, I hadn't expected Julie to say what she said. I hadn't expected her to twist it that way. I started noticing other things over the next few days. Quiet shifts in how they behaved. When I came into a room, the conversation would stop. If I offered to help with homework or make dinner, they'd politely decline. Julie didn't correct them, didn't step in to help explain. It was like she'd quietly rewritten the story of what happened, and I was walking into a movie halfway through, trying to play a role I no longer had. I asked Eli to go for a walk with me. He said he had too much homework. I offered to drive Anna to her dance class like I used to. She said Mom already promised to take her. The doorways were closing, one by one, and I couldn't tell if Julie was closing them or if I had somehow done it myself. On the fourth night, after the kids went to bed, I found Julie folding laundry in our bedroom. I need to understand, I said. Did you really think I wasn't coming back? She folded a towel with perfect precision. I didn't know. You didn't leave a timeline. You just disappeared into treatment and left me with two scared kids and no answers. You could have told them the truth. She looked up finally. What truth, David? That their dad had a breakdown? That he couldn't function? You want to explain panic attacks to a 9-year-old? You want to tell a 12-year-old that their father is lying in a hospital bed because life got too heavy? Yes, I said. I'd rather tell them that than lie. She just shook her head. I told them what made sense at the time. But now you're still letting them believe it. She didn't answer. That night, I sat alone in the guest room. I didn't even try to sleep in our bed. I didn't know if I belonged in it anymore. The door stayed shut. No one came in. A week after I got home, I finally saw it with my own eyes. Eli had left his iPad charging on the kitchen counter while he went upstairs to grab a hoodie. I wasn't snooping. I really wasn't. But the screen lit up when I walked by, and I glanced at the messages on the lock screen without thinking. There was a group chat titled Family Stuff. Just Eli, Anna, and Julie. No me. The last message from Julie read, "Don't let him confuse you. He made his choice." That sentence hit me like a gut punch. Not just because it confirmed what I'd started to suspect, but because it was still happening. She wasn't just letting the kids think I'd walked out. She was actively reinforcing it. I stood there for a moment, not touching the iPad, not reading anything else, just staring at that message. She made it sound like I'd abandoned them deliberately, like I'd packed a bag and walked away from the life we'd built. That night, I brought it up. We were both in the living room, her on the couch, me in the chair across from her. The kids were in their rooms. She was half watching a show, half checking her phone. I didn't waste time. I saw the message you sent to Eli, about me making my choice. She didn't even flinch. You read his messages? It was on the lock screen. I didn't open anything. But Julie, come on. Why are you still saying that? Because it's the truth, she said flatly. No, it's not. My voice was low, but I could feel my hands shaking. You know it's not. I was sick. I asked for help. That's not the same as leaving. She turned toward me, finally. Her eyes were tired. You don't get it. You made a choice not to tell them anything. You made a choice to disappear and leave me to deal with the fallout. I had to answer their questions. I had to manage their fear and confusion. You left me holding all of it. I told you I was scared. I told you I needed help. I know, she said. But you didn't tell them. You didn't even try. You went off to get better and just assumed I'd patch it all up back here. Well, I did what I could. I leaned forward. But now you're making me the bad guy. You're telling them I chose to walk away. She said nothing. I need you to stop. I need you to tell them the truth. She shook her head. It's not that simple anymore. They've already formed their own version of what happened. And frankly, I'm not going to undo it just because you're ready to re-enter the story. I stared at her in disbelief. It's not a story. She looked at me calmly. Isn't it? The next morning, I knocked on Eli's door again. He was getting ready for school, hoodie, on, earbuds dangling around his neck. Can we talk? I asked. He nodded reluctantly and sat down on the edge of his bed. I saw something yesterday, I said, and I realized I need to explain things better than I have. He didn't say anything, just waited. I didn't leave. I didn't choose to walk away. I was having a really hard time, mentally. I was depressed. I wasn't sleeping. I was having panic attacks, and I didn't feel safe. So I admitted myself to a hospital. That's where I was. I wasn't on a trip. I wasn't somewhere else starting a new life. I was getting help so I could come back and be okay again. He looked down at his hands. I should have called. I should have written. I didn't because I was scared. But not of you or your sister. I was scared of what I might say. Scared of sounding broken. That was my mistake. But you need to know I never left you. He looked up finally. So why did Mom say you did? I swallowed. You'd have to ask her that. He nodded slowly. She said you didn't tell anyone. That you just left a note on the counter. I blinked. What note? He pulled open his desk drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I hadn't seen it in years. It was an old receipt I'd scribbled on the morning I left. I wrote something like, gone to check in. Be back when I can. That was for Julie. I hadn't left it for the kids. It was never meant for them. She showed us this the second night you were gone, Eli said. I took it from him, looking at the faint ink. It felt like a piece of evidence from someone else's life. That wasn't meant for you, I said quietly. I didn't know she'd show you that. Eli stared at the floor. It kind of made sense, though. You didn't text. You didn't call. It just felt like you didn't want to deal with us. I wanted to tell him how wrong that was. I wanted to explain everything, but I could tell he wasn't ready for a speech. So I just said, I'm sorry. I should have done it differently. He gave a small nod. As I stood up to leave, he said, You were really in the hospital? Like, with doctors? Yes. For your brain? I nodded. For my brain. He looked like he wanted to ask more, but instead he said, Okay, and went back to his desk. I took that as something. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. But a door that hadn't closed all the way. Anna, though, that would take more time. And with Julie, I wasn't sure we were even in the same reality anymore. A few days later, I came home from the grocery store and found Anna crying in the hallway. Not loud crying, just curled up on the floor, hugging her knees, her face buried. It startled me because I hadn't seen her cry in months, even when I'd first returned. I dropped the bag on the counter and rushed over. Anna, hey, what's wrong? She didn't answer at first. Her whole body was tight, like she was holding something in. I knelt next to her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She finally looked up, and her eyes were red. I don't know who to believe. My stomach sank. What do you mean? She sniffled. You said you were in the hospital, but Mom said you left because you couldn't do it anymore, that you didn't want to be our dad. And Eli says you told him something different than what you told me. I sat down on the floor next to her. I didn't want to crowd her, but I wasn't going to leave her there alone. Anna, listen to me, I said quietly. I was in the hospital. I wasn't well. I was having a hard time taking care of myself, let alone anyone else. But that doesn't mean I didn't want to be your dad. I've always wanted to be your dad. But you didn't call, she whispered. I know. I was scared. I thought if I said the wrong thing, I'd scare you more. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. Did you leave on purpose? No, I said. I left to get better, so I could come back. She was quiet for a while, then nodded slowly. Okay. I didn't feel like I'd won her over. It felt more like she was making a temporary truce with her own confusion. Later that night, Julie came into the guest room without knocking. She hadn't done that since I got back. You talked to Anna? She said. Her arms were crossed. She was crying in the hallway, I said. What did you want me to do? Ignore her? I didn't say that, she snapped. But I told her not to bring it up again. My voice got tight. Why? Because you didn't want her to hear anything that doesn't fit the version you gave her? Julie's eyes narrowed. Because I've been the one dealing with their emotions for weeks. You don't get to just come back and undo everything because you've decided you're better now. I stood up. I'm not trying to undo anything. I'm trying to give them the truth. You're the one rewriting history. I managed history, she shot back. I gave them stability. You weren't here. I was. You could have told them where I was. And traumatized them? No, I said. You didn't want to lose control of the story. That landed. I could tell by the way her mouth tightened and her eyes flared for a second. You think I did this to punish you? She said, her voice suddenly lower. You think I enjoyed watching our kids pull away from their father? I think, I said. You made a choice. When I left, you were angry. You felt abandoned, even though I explained everything. And instead of helping them understand, you made me the villain. She turned toward the door. I did what I had to. That line doesn't mean anything when it hurts people. She didn't respond. She left the room. After she left, I lay awake and thought about what to do next. I couldn't force her to change what she'd said to the kids, but I could stop pretending we were still on the same side. The next morning, I asked the kids if they wanted to have lunch with just me that weekend. Somewhere neutral, no pressure. They hesitated, but eventually agreed. Julie didn't stop them, though she made a comment under her breath as they left the room. Have fun rewriting your version. At lunch, I didn't talk much about what happened. I just let them talk. I asked about school, about their friends, about small things. I didn't want it to be another explanation session. I wanted it to feel like a normal day with their dad. At one point, Anna said, You're different. I nodded. I feel different. She asked, In a good way? I hope so. Eli looked up from his burger. Mom says people don't really change. I met his eyes. Sometimes they do, if they want to. He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. That evening, Julie was waiting when we got back. She didn't ask how. It went. She just looked at me and said, I want to talk about custody. I froze. What? I think we should separate. Start with a trial. But it's time. I stared at her. You're making this about control. She looked exhausted. I'm making this about what's best for them. And for me. I can't keep living with someone who broke and then came back pretending none of it counts. I'm not pretending, I said. I'm fighting to be part of their lives. Then do it from your own place. And just like that, the next phase began. Not with a bang, but with a quiet statement at the end of a long hallway of choices. Hers and mine. Julie's lawyer emailed me the next morning. It wasn't dramatic, just a message marked preliminary custody discussion. I opened it at the dining table with a cup of coffee and my stomach already sour. She hadn't wasted any time. There were attachments, templates, timelines, phrases like temporary agreement and parenting plan draft. I'd barely even had a chance to settle back into my role in the house before she was carving it into pieces. That night, I brought it up when the kids were watching TV upstairs. I didn't want them to hear. I got your lawyer's email, I said. Julie didn't look up from the sink. She was rinsing dishes without much urgency, like we were just talking about weekend plans. Good, she said. I told her to keep it simple for now. You really think this is simple? She didn't answer that, just kept working. I sat down. You're pushing for full custody. I'm pushing for consistency, she said. They've had enough instability. You moving in and out of their lives, mentally, physically, it's too much. I stared at her. You're using my hospital stay as ammunition. I'm using facts. No, I said. If this were really about what's best for them, you'd tell the truth. You'd help them understand what happened, not twist it. She turned off the faucet. They already understand it in their own way. I'm not going to rip open their progress because you've suddenly decided you want to be the hero again. I laughed once, bitter. You don't get to cast me as the villain and then call it progress. We didn't talk after that. I left the room. Not angrily, just empty. A few days later, Eli and I were in the garage looking for an old box of Lego sets he wanted to rebuild. It was the first time he'd asked to do anything with me that wasn't assigned or scheduled. I handed him the box from the top shelf and we sat on the concrete floor, sorting through parts. After a while, he said, Mom says I shouldn't trust people who disappear. I looked up. She said that? He nodded without looking at me. She said sometimes people pretend they're okay and then just walk away, and we should be ready if it happens again. I didn't answer right away. I picked up a half-built spaceship and looked at it. Something from years ago. One of the ones we used to build together on Saturday mornings. Do you think I'm going to leave again? I asked him. He shrugged. I don't know. I didn't think you would the first time. I set the ship down. I don't blame you for feeling that way, but I want you to know something. I didn't plan what happened. I didn't choose it like someone chooses a vacation. I didn't want to go. I needed to. And I came back because I missed you, because I wanted to be here. He nodded a little. It's just hard to know what's true. I didn't push. We sat there for another hour, building in silence. And for once, it felt almost like before. But that night, after he went to bed, I found something in the trash that made my stomach drop. It was a printed form from Julie's lawyer. On it, she'd written notes. I recognized her handwriting. One section was about parental reliability, and next to it she'd written, hospitalization unknown to children at time of departure. Trust broken. Under recommendations, she'd written, limited supervised visits until stability is proven. I took a photo of it with my phone before she could destroy it completely. The next day, I made an appointment with my own lawyer. I brought everything. My discharge papers, my therapist's notes, the email from her attorney, and the photo of the form. My lawyer was calm and clinical. She asked questions I hadn't thought to ask. What were the exact dates? Did Julie sign the intake forms? Did I have proof she knew I was checking in voluntarily? I do, I said. She drove me there. The lawyer nodded slowly. And she's now framing that decision as abandonment? Worse, I said. She's telling the kids I walked out. She's using their confusion to build a custody case. Her face hardened. That's parental alienation. I knew the term. I'd read about it, but it felt too clinical for what was actually happening. Too neat. What was happening in our house wasn't about legal definitions. It was about erosion. Slow, deliberate erosion of who I was to them. I left that meeting with instructions to document everything. Conversations. Messages. Any direct evidence that Julie was twisting the story or trying to manipulate the kids. I felt gross doing it, like I was preparing for battle against someone I once chose to marry. But I also knew I didn't have a choice. That weekend, when it was my scheduled time to take the kids to the movies, Julie said they weren't feeling up to it. They're tired, she said. Eli stood in the hallway behind her, fully dressed. So did Anna. They weren't sick. They weren't tired. You're blocking time now? I asked. I'm protecting them, she said. No, you're keeping them angry so they don't have to ask you why you lied. Her eyes didn't blink. Leave. David, you're not helping anyone right now. I didn't fight. Not out loud. I went back to my car, sat there with the engine off, and texted my lawyer. Blocked visitation, happening now. That night, I started recording everything. Not for revenge, not even for the case, really. I needed it to remind myself I wasn't losing my mind again. Because if Julie kept rewriting what happened, and the kids kept believing her, there was a very real chance they'd forget who I used to be. And no one else was going to stop that but me. It didn't hit all at once. That's what surprised me. I thought there'd be some kind of breaking point, a confrontation, or a shouting match, or some dramatic moment that would explain the weight I started carrying every day. But it wasn't like that. It crept in slowly, quietly, like a draft in the house you don't notice until your bones are cold. The first real gut punch came 2 weeks after the blocked movie visit. Anna had a school performance, one of those all-grade chorus nights where they sing songs about seasons or animals, off-key but sweet. Julie hadn't said anything to me about it, but I found the flyer on the fridge the day before. So I showed up. I stood in the back of the gym, behind the rows of folding chairs, trying not to make a big deal of it. Anna saw me as she walked on stage, and for a second, her face went completely blank. Not happy, not nervous, just still. Then she looked away. I stayed through the whole performance, clapped at all the right times. When it ended, I walked toward the side of the gym where the parents were picking up their kids. Julie was already there. Eli stood next to her. He glanced at me, but didn't say anything. I caught up to Anna just as she reached them. "Hey, Bug," I said. "You were great up there." She looked at Julie, then back at me. "Why are you here?" I froze. "I wanted to see you sing." "I thought you weren't coming," she said, and there was no excitement in her voice, just a quiet, tired sort of frustration, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. Julie put a hand on her back and gently steered her away. "We're heading out," she said, not looking at me. Long night. That was it. No invitation to walk with them to the car. No chance for a hug. Just a wall. I stood in the parking lot after they left. It was dark and cold, and the gym lights buzzed behind me. My hands were in my pockets, and I didn't move for a long time. I thought about calling someone, my sister maybe, but I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain what it felt like to watch your daughter look at you like a stranger in front of people you used to sit next to at PTA meetings. That night, I told my therapist everything. I didn't cry. I just laid it out. I didn't even realize how detached I'd become in describing it all until she stopped me mid-sentence. "David," she said, "you're talking like this is happening to someone else." "I feel like it is," I said, "like I'm just watching it all fall apart from the outside." We talked for an hour. She said the words grief, identity, displacement. I nodded, but they didn't land. What did land was what she said at the end. "It's not just about the custody, David. You're grieving the version of fatherhood you built your life around." That stuck with me. I wrote it down in my notes app after the session. Read it a few times. It was true. I'd built my whole life around the idea of being a certain kind of dad. Present. Reliable. The one who coached soccer when I hated sports. The one who stayed up helping with science projects and practiced multiplication tables in the car. And now, every time I reached for that version of myself, I got pushed back. 2 days later, I saw Eli after school. He was walking home, earbuds in. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Want a ride?" I asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure." We drove in silence for most of the way. I didn't try to force anything. I just wanted to be next to him, even if it was quiet. As we pulled up to the house, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you ever think about not coming back?" I looked at him. He was staring out the window, not accusing, not angry, just curious in a way that hurt more than anything else. "I thought about whether I could come back," I said. "Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if I could be the person you needed." He nodded slowly. "Mom said you were gone because you gave up." "That's not true." "I know," he said. Then he got out of the car. He knew. That should have made me feel better, but instead it made the wait worse. Because now he was stuck in the middle, aware of the cracks between our stories, smart enough to read between the lines, but still young enough to feel like he had to pick a side. That night, I got a text from Julie. "Please don't pick them up without asking. It confuses things." I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in the dark in the guest room with my laptop open, flipping through old photos of us. Birthday parties, beach trips, lazy Sunday mornings. Pictures where I was always there. Proof, I told myself. Proof that I didn't just disappear. But photos don't explain absence. They don't explain silence. They don't explain why your kids look through you at chorus night, or why you're sleeping in the room that used to be for guests. They don't undo what's already unraveling. And as I sat there, it finally hit me. Not all at once, but hard and full. I wasn't trying to rebuild what we had. I was fighting just to stay in the picture at all. My lawyer filed for a formal custody review the following Monday. I signed the paperwork after work in her office downtown. It was quiet and clinical. Lots of stapled packets, dates highlighted, signatures required. At the end, she looked at me and said, "This is going to get messier before it gets better. Are you ready for that?" I nodded, but I wasn't. Not really. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a note on the kitchen table. It was short, written in Julie's handwriting, no greeting or signature. Took the kids to my parents for a few days. I need space. Don't call. The note sat alone under a magnet. No context, no warning. I texted her. No response. Called her phone twice, straight to voicemail. By the third day, my lawyer told me I had grounds to file for a temporary order to prevent relocation of the kids without mutual agreement. We filed it. Julie was served the next morning. She came back that afternoon. I was sitting in the living room when the door opened. She walked in with Anna behind her, holding a tablet, and Eli trailing a few feet back. No eye contact, No hellos. Julie stood in the entryway, keys still in her hand, and looked at me like I was something to be scraped off her shoe. So, this is how it's going to be now? She said. You left with no warning, I said. What did you expect? I expected you not to sick lawyers on me like we're in a custody war. You started it, I said quietly. You've been cutting me out since I got back. Eli went straight to his room. Anna hesitated, then followed. Julie and I stood there alone. You want to talk about being cut out? She said. Try holding the family together while your husband checks out for 3 weeks and comes home expecting a standing ovation. I didn't expect anything, I said. I just wanted honesty. Well, she said, welcome to the real world. The kids don't need honesty. They need safety, and that's what I give them. She stormed upstairs. I didn't follow her. The following weekend was the first court-approved shared visitation. I picked the kids up at noon. Julie didn't say a word during the exchange, just opened the door, stepped aside, and let them pass like we were part of some bureaucratic process. In the car, Anna asked, What are we doing today? Whatever you want, I said. No plans, just us. They didn't talk much, but they didn't seem angry, just cautious. We ended up at a park. I brought sandwiches. We sat on a bench and watched dogs run through the grass. Eli scrolled through his phone. Anna balanced on a log like it was a tightrope. She looked over her shoulder and said, Mom said we have to go home early. She said you don't know how to handle us for long. I kept my voice steady. That's not true. I've taken care of you since you were babies. Not lately, she said, and just like that, she jumped down and ran toward the swings. It was a strange afternoon. Not warm, not cold. The sun kept coming and going behind clouds. We stayed until 4, then I dropped them off. Later that night, I got an email from Julie. You crossed the line today. Don't use your time to contradict what I've taught them. You don't get to unparent me. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the message, added it to the folder for my lawyer, and filed a copy in the drawer in the guest room, where I kept everything now. 3 days after that, the school counselor called me. She said Anna had been having trouble concentrating, that she seemed emotionally distant during group activities, that when they asked what was going on at home, she just said, Sometimes Dad shows up now. The counselor asked if there had been any major changes recently. I told her, yes, but not the kind you can explain in a few sentences. She asked if I'd be willing to meet with her and the kids for a mediated family session. I said yes immediately. Julie said no. She doesn't need more confusion, she texted me. She needs consistency. Your therapist can't fix what you broke. It wasn't just a power move. It was a wedge. The court hearing was 2 weeks away. I spent every night leading up to it gathering more. Text messages, dates of missed visitations, photos of the fridge note, my discharge forms, the old group chat screenshot, even statements from a few friends who'd witnessed the shift in how Julie talked about me in front of the kids. It all painted a picture. Not a perfect one, because I had failed in some ways too, but one that showed I hadn't walked away, that I was trying to come back. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror in a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit anymore. My hands shook a little when I tied the knot in my tie. The kids stayed with Julie that day. I didn't see them. In court, it was quiet. Just the judge, the lawyers, and a pile of carefully worded documents. No one raised their voice. Julie sat across from me, unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was angry, anxious, or completely numb. My lawyer made the case for equal parenting time. She read a few excerpts from Julie's messages. She pointed out the inconsistencies in her version of events. She kept it clinical, neutral, professional. Julie's lawyer countered with what I expected. Instability, absence, the word voluntary used as an accusation. But they couldn't prove abandonment, because I didn't abandon them. And even if the kids didn't fully understand that yet, the court did. The judge didn't rule that day. They said they'd review and notify both parties within a week. But I walked out of that courtroom with something I hadn't felt since I'd come home. The sense that, finally, someone had seen what she was doing. The court's decision came by mail on a Thursday afternoon. I sat in my parked car outside the house with the envelope in my lap for almost 10 minutes before I opened it. The outside was plain, no drama. Inside, a short letter and a longer, formal ruling. Joint custody. Temporary for now. Pending a 6-month review. Equal parenting time. Alternating weekends. And 1 weeknight each. All exchanges to be done in public locations. School counselor sessions encouraged, but not mandated. The judge made one specific note in the ruling. No evidence supports claims of abandonment. I read that line 3 times. It didn't undo anything. Not really. It didn't make the kids suddenly trust me again. But it mattered. Someone had looked at the facts and said what I'd been saying since I walked back through the front door. I didn't walk out. That night, I emailed the counselor at Anna's school and forwarded her the decision. I asked if we could revisit the idea of family sessions. She wrote back quickly. If both parents consent, we can start as soon as next week. Julie never replied. But she didn't block it either. The first time I had the kids overnight after the ruling, I picked them up at a diner halfway between our places. Julie didn't say much. Just a nod. No eye contact. She handed over a small bag and walked back to her car. Anna was quiet during the drive. Eli had headphones in. I tried not to talk too much. I just played music they liked, stopped for ice cream without making it a big deal. Let them sit how they wanted on the couch when we got home. No big speeches. Just space. Later that evening, I found a drawing in Anna's backpack. It was half crumpled. A page from one of those spiral notebooks she liked. A house. A stick figure on one side. Two smaller ones on the other. A line down the middle. The figure on the left had Dad written above it. The two on the right said me and Eli. No mom. Just the three of us. Separated. I didn't ask her about it. I just sat on the edge of my bed, holding it, feeling the paper go soft in my hands. The next week, at the counselor's office, Anna wouldn't sit next to me. She sat with her arms crossed, one foot kicking the chair leg over and over. The counselor asked gentle questions. I tried to follow her lead. At one point, I said, Anna, I know things feel split, right now, but I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere. She didn't respond. The counselor let the silence stretch. Then Anna said, Mom said you're trying to look like a good dad now because the court's watching. It hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I'm not doing this for the court, I said quietly. I'm doing it for you and Eli because I love you and I want to be here, even when no one's watching. She didn't say anything else that day. The counselor told me afterward, it'll take time. The fact that she said it out loud means she's starting to test whether it's safe to question what she's been told. I nodded, but it didn't feel like progress yet. With Eli, things shifted faster. A few weeks into the new schedule, we went to a bookstore together. He was browsing comics, and I saw him hesitate near the cafe. I asked if he wanted something. He shrugged. I got us both hot chocolate anyway. While we sat at the little table, he said, Mom still says you weren't ready to be a parent. I stared into my cup. Sometimes I wasn't. That part's true. He looked at me. But you are now? I think I'm more ready now than I've ever been. He didn't nod, but he didn't push back either. He just took a sip and said, Can I show you the game I'm building later? That night, we sat at my kitchen table, hunched over his laptop, looking at lines of code I barely understood. He was explaining how a dialogue tree worked in the game when he paused mid-sentence and said, You seem more calm now. I feel more calm. Was the hospital really that bad? It was hard, I said, but it helped. I was scared when I went in, but I came out better. Not perfect, just more myself. He nodded. I think I get that. It didn't fix everything, but it was a crack in the wall. Meanwhile, things with Julie grew colder. We only spoke when necessary. Exchanges became stiff, transactional. She still wouldn't acknowledge the court's ruling directly, but she followed it. Barely. Always cutting it close on timing. Always acting like she was doing me a favor. One day, during drop-off, she handed me a sealed envelope. No eye contact. For your records, she said, and walked off. Inside was a printed list of concerns. She'd itemized everything she thought made me unfit. History of mental health treatment, lack of communication during hospitalization, emotional instability from before my departure, and ongoing influence through counselor-led narrative correction. That last part stung the most. Narrative correction. Like I was brainwashing my own kids. I forwarded it to my lawyer. She said, she's building a foundation for an appeal. She's not done. I was, though. I was done pretending this could be fixed by court orders and scheduled visits. Julie wasn't going to stop. And the kids weren't going to just bounce back from being told one version of me for months, and then handed another. Every step forward I took, she'd quietly build a new obstacle behind them. It wasn't a fight I could win by force. So I stopped trying to prove anything to Julie. I started showing up for the kids in the smallest ways. Not loud gestures, just consistency. Every weeknight visit, every weekend. Same spot, same time. I kept snacks they liked in the cupboard. Got extra blankets for when Anna fell asleep on the couch. Bought a charger for Eli's iPad that stayed in my car, so he didn't have to bring his own. I didn't talk about the past unless they asked. When Anna finally sat next to me on the couch again, it felt like nothing, and everything. When Eli sent me a screenshot of a bug in his game, just to say, can you help me figure this out? I did. No speeches, no pushing, just showing up. And for the first time since I'd come home, I realized something. This wasn't about fixing the story Julie had told. It was about writing mine, slowly, quietly, until it was strong enough for them to stand on. The idea came quietly, like most of the real decisions do. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a mug, watching the steam from the hot water curl up the window. It was almost spring by then. There were little signs, buds on the tree outside, streaks of light in the early morning, a soft shift in the air. And I thought, I can't do this in halves anymore. Not the visits, not the court filings, not the back and forths with Julie, not the slow rebuilds with the kids. Interrupted every time something invisible shifted behind the scenes. I was still in the guest room, still living in the margins of my own life. I called my lawyer and asked what it would take to petition for full legal custody. There was a pause. Then she said, that's a big move. You'd need to show it's not retaliatory, that it's not about winning something back, but about protecting the children's emotional well-being. I said, that's exactly what it's about. We spent the next few weeks building it. I stayed quiet with the kids. I didn't let on what was happening. I kept showing up, exactly the same way. Same times, same tone, same consistency. Julie must have sensed something, though. Her emails got more clipped. Her comments during exchanges got colder, more barbed. You think you're the stable one now? She said one afternoon, after Eli and Anna had walked ahead to the car. You think a few scheduled weekends makes up for everything? No, I said, but lying to them for months doesn't either. Her jaw tightened. They trust me. They're safe with me. They don't trust anyone fully right now, I said. That's the problem. She walked away. The hearing was set for early May. The day I told the kids, I didn't make it formal. We were sitting on the floor of my living room, building a puzzle. Eli was half focused, scrolling on his phone between pieces. Anna had finally started sitting closer to me again, leaning into my shoulder when she was tired. I want to tell you something, I said, and I want you to hear it from me first. They both looked up. I've asked the court to let me take on more responsibility, to be the one who makes decisions about school, doctors, things like that. It doesn't mean you won't see your mom. That's not what this is about. It's just that things have been confusing, and I think I can help make them less confusing. Anna frowned. You mean like, be the boss? No, I said. I mean be consistent. Make sure you're getting the same version of things no matter where you are. Eli asked, what if mom doesn't want that? I know she doesn't, I said, but this isn't about what she wants or what I want. It's about what's right for you. They were quiet, not confused, just absorbing it. Then Anna asked, will we have to pick who to live with? No, I said. That's not what this is. But later that night, I realized she was probably asking something deeper, because in her world, everything was about choosing sides, and she had never really had the chance not to. 2 days before the hearing, Julie called me. That alone was unusual. She hadn't called directly in months. Can we meet before this becomes something ugly? She asked. I agreed. We sat at a small coffee shop near the courthouse. Neutral territory. She wore sunglasses even though we were inside. Her hands were clenched around her cup. I've already talked to my lawyer, she said. I know what you're asking for. I think it's reckless. I think it's necessary. She studied me. You're not the same person who walked into that hospital last year. I know. She hesitated. Sometimes I wonder if that's what I'm afraid of. That surprised me. Why? I asked. Because if you're better, now, then what I said, can't be explained away by panic or survival mode. There it was, a rare moment of clarity. I don't want to take them from you, I said. I just want to stop the slow damage. The stuff they don't even know is happening to them yet. Julie didn't cry, but her voice cracked just slightly. They used to run to you when you came home. I still remember that, and I hate that I helped change it. You can still fix part of it, I said. But we have to stop pretending we're on the same page. We're not, and we both know it. She didn't argue. The day of the hearing, it rained. Not hard. Just enough to make everything gray and blurry. The courtroom was small. Just a few benches. A raised platform. We didn't bring the kids. It wasn't that kind of hearing. Julie didn't fight as hard as I thought she would. Her lawyer presented her objections. Said I was selectively stable. Said there was lingering, volatility. But when the judge asked Julie directly whether she still believed I'd abandoned the family, she paused. Then she said, no, I don't. And that changed everything. I don't know what led her to say it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a tiredness in her she hadn't let herself name. But it meant the court saw us differently after that. They granted me full legal custody. Joint physical. Julie still had her time. But the decisions, the responsibility, shifted. And in that moment, sitting there while the judge read it out loud, I realized something permanent had happened. Not a win. Not a loss. A line drawn in the ground that wouldn't be crossed again. I didn't tell them right away. After the hearing, I drove home and sat in the driveway for a long time. I could see the curtains drawn in the front window. The porch light was on, even though it was still daylight. Inside, the house was quiet. My house. Not a place I passed through. Not somewhere I was temporarily allowed to be. When the kids arrived later that afternoon for their regular weeknight stay, I didn't mention the ruling. We ate dinner, just grilled cheese and tomato soup, and then sat around the table while Eli told me about a group project he hated. Anna was half listening, drawing something in the margin of a notepad. It felt normal. After they went to bed, I sat in the hallway for a while, not doing anything, just sitting there, listening to their breathing through slightly open doors. And I thought, this is it. This is what I've been trying to get back to. Not authority, not control, just presence. The next day, I picked them up from school. I told them in the car, parked under the same old tree by the curb. The court made a decision, I said. Starting now, I'll be the one in charge of school stuff. Doctors, trips, anything big. It doesn't mean you won't see mom. That's not changing. It just means I'll be more involved with everything. Anna was quiet. Eli looked at me. You fought for us? Yeah, I said. I did. Even after all that stuff? Especially after all that stuff. He nodded and turned back to the window. At home, we didn't talk about it again that night. But something shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly. Eli started asking, before texting Julie during my time. Anna asked if I could help her with a science model she'd been avoiding. One night a few weeks later, while brushing her teeth, she said, "It feels less confusing now." And that stayed with me. Julie didn't say much in the weeks that followed. Our interactions were still sharp around the edges, but she stopped fighting the schedule. No surprise cancellations. No cryptic texts. She did, however, send an email. Just one line. I hope you do better with them than I did. I didn't reply. What was there to say? It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. A break in the tension. The counselor. Sessions with Anna continued. Slowly, her drawings changed. Fewer walls, more bridges. One had all four of us on one side, no line between. That one she didn't give me. I only saw it when the counselor held it up during a session. She's still working through it, she said. I nodded, EL. So am I. By summer, the routine had taken hold. The kids packed without being reminded. They remembered which house they were at on which days. The tension at handoffs faded. Eli started texting me just to talk. About games, or a new anime, or things he didn't want to bring up in person. Anna stopped asking if I was leaving again. One night, as we sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll in, she leaned into my side without saying anything. Her hand found mine, and we stayed like that until the rain started to fall in hard sheets. The storm passed. It didn't erase everything. They still flinched sometimes at raised voices. Still asked twice when plans changed unexpectedly. Still had moments where silence felt safer than conversation. But they stayed. And I stayed. I think that's the part they needed most. Not perfection, not explanations. Just someone who didn't disappear. Even when it would have been easier to.